Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to NBA World. Athletes of all kind exist and coaches of all sorts do as well. So it would make sense that sometimes either the athlete or coach is difficult to manage. This can result in some pretty bad feuds, and there has been some notable animosity between players and coaches. This issue isn't generational and has been occurring for years. Number 1. LeBron James versus David Blatt. LeBron James has become a household name, and some could say he owes this to his coaches to an extent. David Blatt was the one who instructed him on his moves when the Cavaliers made it to the NBA Finals. But unfortunately, they lost this game. Blatt was fired the year later even when the Cavs flourished under him, and many sources say that James had been behind it. This isn't too much of a stretch seeing as how horribly he treated Blatt. He'd end up coaching himself, completely ignoring a man who'd built his life around giving players plays. Number 2. Neal versus Bob Knight. Have you ever heard of that story about a basketball coach throwing a chair across the basketball court? If so, that was Bob Knight, notorious for his temper. In early 2000, he was accused of harming his fellow teammate, Neal. Knight stated that nothing of the sort had occurred, but was proven to be a liar when video evidence came to life. I mean, talk about hating one another enough to get into a physical altercation. Number 3. Allen Iverson versus Larry Brown. In this case, the player and coach were polar opposites. Larry Brown was a middle-aged white man who had coached basketball for years, while Allen Iverson was a very young African-American who'd gotten into the NBA only years prior. The two never got along. Iverson would often refuse to play as Brown instructed, and this would never end well. Thankfully, they were somewhat able to settle their differences long enough for the 76ers to make it to the NBA Finals. Number 4. Rajon Rondo versus Rick Carlisle. When Rajon Rondo, an all-star guard, was acquired by the Mavericks, everyone thought that it would get the team on their feet. However, the head coach of the Mavs, Rick Carlisle, was not someone Rondo wished to befriend. The feud came to a head in the playoffs when Carlisle played Rondo a grand total of half a minute in a game against the Houston Rockets. Ultimately, statements were exchanged throughout the media and Rondo had to leave the Mavericks. Number 5. Alex Rodriguez versus Joe Torre. Like all, Alex Rodriguez hit a slump in the 2006 playoffs, and it got so bad that the manager had to demote him to 8th in the lineup. This justifiably upset Rodriguez, and it's where the hatred arose between him and his coach, Joe Torre. Torre published a book after retiring as a coach, bashing Rodriguez consistently, labeling him as one of the most entitled players he'd ever met. Number 6. Magic Johnson versus Paul Westhead. Paul Westhead was a great coach. In just his first season, he was able to take the Lakers to the NBA championships. However, his streak was cut short when they lost to the Rockets. That's when the downward spiral began. Magic Johnson was accused of being a part of the firing process of Westhead as onlookers relayed their troublesome relationship. I mean, it's strange for a team to fire a coach after one loss, right? Number 7. LeSean McCoy versus Chip Kelly. In theory, Chip Kelly's offensive strategies were made for LeSean McCoy. But in reality, things are never as they seem. McCoy disliked Kelly's operation and the two never were able to see eye to eye. It went so far that McCoy tried to put words in Kelly's mouth to paint him as a villain in the media. In the end, McCoy went to Buffalo, and while at the time Kelly was kept on as a coach, he was fired soon after. Number 8. Latrell Sprewell versus PJ Karlesimo. Another case of pretty bad temper is that of Latrell Sprewell's. On one occasion, Sprewell's coach, PJ Karlesimo, was hounding him about something which got the NBA player a little worked up. Apparently, he'd been having a pretty bad day, and this had just been the icing on the cake. Even though Sprewell told Carlesimo to lay off him because he wasn't in the mood, the coach didn't heed his words. This prompted Sprewell to attack him, but thankfully not much harm came to the victim. Sprewell seemed to despise the condescending attitude and tone Carlesimo would often take. Number 9. George Karl versus Boogie Cousins. It wasn't until 2016 when coach George Karl was fired due in large part to Boogie Cousins' disrespectful attitude towards him. While they never saw eye to eye, their dysfunctional relationship always seemed to hit Karl the hardest. Over the course of their time together, Cousins would often publicly question Karl's methods, especially those regarding offense. Number 10. Dwight Howard vs. Stan Van Gundy. As a young, fresh basketball player, Dwight Howard was very difficult to handle. Unfortunately, this made him all the more critical of his coaches, namely Stan Van Gundy. Despite Howard being the brat, it seemed that Gundy was the one trying to make things work. In 2012, Gundy stated that he had heard Howard telling the front office to fire the coach. This brings us to the end of our video. I hope you enjoyed it. Hit like if you did, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss any of our videos in the future. Also watch the 2 videos that are on your screen because I'm sure you'll love them. With that, I'll see you in the next video.